The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the QATV staff or board of directors. QATV, in compliance with FCC regulations, is prohibited from exercising control over the content of independent, member-produced public access programming.
Turn out the light. Believe. This is Greater Boston Paranormal.
Do you feel it? It went through like a path, like a wave.
Are you still here with us? What are your intentions?
Murder.
Okay, so we're starting off with our guest laughing at our intro, but we'll get back to him in a few seconds. Right now, welcome back to Greater Boston Paranormal TV. I'm Don DeCristofaro. On my far right, you have Sondra Morgan.
Hey there.
As I said, welcome back. It's been a little while since we've done a show,
Sure has.
but we got a good one for you tonight, and we're going to jump in. In the middle here, between us, we have James Annitto. James and I have been friends for quite some time now. James is an investigator, but his investigations are a little bit different than ours. He's an expert in a field that is a little bit different than what we do. So we're going to get into that. We decided from the very beginning that we weren't going to have other investigators on the show. We decided that from the get-go. Mm-hmm. But as I said, James is a little bit different. So we're going to get into this. James is a demonologist, which basically means that he deals in the kind of stuff that we would rather stay away from. But James, why don't you, before we really even get going, what does that mean to you? Being a demonologist, what does this mean to you as opposed to being an investigator?
Well, that's always a good question because, everybody gets this kind of incantation of this is what a demonologist is. Everybody thinks more in black, doing black rituals, part of black masses. But really, in fact, it's, the study and lore of wicked spirits throughout time. And, there's the demonologist that is the academic sense, which kind of branches off of theology and more so angiology. But I apply a lot of what has been kind of documented through possible demonic cases, psychological viewpoints, and I take what I've learned as a paranormal investigator throughout my many years and then apply that through the academic research and apply it. Just as like an anthropologist would take a lot of their academic nature of what they learn through anthropology and then apply it in medicine or in business. So I apply that academia and try to attempt to help people and give them an ability to kind of give them a conclusion or a cause and effect of why this is happening.
Okay, all right.
All right, I am extremely interested in what a demonologist is because, I'm sure like a lot of our viewers, they think demonologist and they think, scary, you're going in and you're sending the devil back to hell. I mean, it really, if you really look at it, that seems what it is. And
of course.
But that's not entirely what it is from what you just described to us.
Yeah.
Can you tell us maybe something that you were involved in, a case you were involved in that scared the crap out of you?
Well,
well put.
well put for sure. Oh, well, I'm not going to say I've never ever been in the sense scared because I think when we deal with our kind of physical reactions like the fight or flight, our brain triggers differently than maybe how our heart or our kind of our soul or body will react to certain things. So there's been moments in my career of doing this where, of course, that flight kicked in. But as I always say, I'm too moronic to actually leave because I actually know the situation at hand, what's going on. Do I leave this family or leave this business and then look, of course, one, incapable, but also then if the specialist is fleeing from a location, what's their
Right,
mental
yeah.
What kind of
capacity?
message is that?
Yeah,
What kind of
that's
message
true.
does it send? So I don't really get scared in the same token a lot of people would, because I feel like I'm built differently. Like I always say to people, and you know, Ed Warren used to say this, regardless of what you think of the Warrens or not. You know, I have my love-hate relationship with them, but one thing he said, it's a calling. You're called to do this, is because I always say I never woke up when I was a kid and said, I really want to be a demonologist or I want to be an exorcist. You know, that wasn't in my vocabulary. That wasn't in like what I wanted to be growing up. So I kind of got dragged in this path through many different kind of wavelengths of my life, of childhood trauma, not really having a religious background, being agnostic, atheist, or what many of the other terms people use nowadays to coincide with not being religious. But I would say that the case that really kind of enamored me, but also opened me up to demonology, is my first demonic case in Salem, Massachusetts. Because there was a point where in academia you can study something so much and so much and so much, but until you have that real life experience or understand why this is being studied, you really don't understand the kind of the full dynamics of it. So being and experiencing a full demonic possession that was dealt with by a psychologist, and then I was brought on, was very eye-opening to me, because usually now in my time of frame of doing things, I call specialists. I work with psychologists, therapists, physicians, and you know, this was kind of like, this exists. Because at that point, even though I studied it and had a faith, you always hear the dichotomy of good and evil, and you know, you can see good and evil in people, because every day we see it now in the present. But when you see it in the preternatural sense, or the supernatural sense, it kind of smacks in the face. But it was very powerful to see, because it just made me stronger in with what I am doing and what my trajectory is in my life.
No, your first case. Now, how did you become a demonologist? What exactly? How did that happen?
Well, you know, there's a band camp that we go to and we get badges.
I want to get one.
But in the real sense, like, so when you look, you know, I was ordained in two different Christian denominations. I was a old Catholic deacon, and I was also a Church of Christ minister. You know, I wasn't a pastor, I was a deliverance minister. But so in those kind of career paths, you know, you go through seminary programs, or you go through pastoral assistancy to then become a minister. But with demonology, unless you're acquainted by the Roman Catholic Church as a demonologist, which is very rare. There was only really one man in a time frame that I know of, and his name was Adam Bly, and I still believe it's pretty frequent. He actually has a PhD in psychology, and then also assesses cases for the Catholic Church. But really, there is no pathway to say, I want to be a demonologist for a career, because really it's not a career path. I don't make money doing it beside maybe lectures that I do. And really how I became a demonologist is really just my intrigue into the topic of good and evil. Because when I got into the paranormal, it was kind of a question because I really, like I said, I didn't have that religious background at first. So I would read all these books, theological books. You know, I was very big into Darwinism, evolutionary biology when I was a kid, mythologies. So I would read a lot of this material, and then when I knew of the paranormal kind of pipe bomb that went off, especially in Rhode Island with ghost hunters, I started to say, oh, people actually do this. So then I started applying that kind of intrigue and questioning, and said, okay, well, from all the material I've read throughout time as a child, you know, we hear about spirits, the Holy Spirit. So I started to kind of analyze in my head, well, maybe this is an easy way to think if ghosts exist, maybe God does actually exist. So really kind of being an early natured paranormal investigator, started at 15 years old, kind of really led me path towards that demonology topic, because like I said, evil was kind of that question okay, does good and evil exist in the preternatural sense, which is beyond natural? And really kind of what was the launching point, and we lectured together for quite a while, and we worked together for quite a while, was I started working with a man named Carl Johnson, who was the original, him and his brother were the original investigators of the Conjuring House in Harrisville, Rhode Island.
They're the ones that called in the Warrens.
Warrens, they did, correct.
Okay.
And they were also on the first 2 seasons of Ghost Hunters. And because being in Rhode Island, I had a really big love for Ghost Hunters, and of course, understanding demonology. Of course, we knew about Ed Warren because, you know, even though it wasn't the pop culture explosion now it is today with the Conjuring movies, if you really knew and understood the lineage of how paranormal investigating has adapted, of course, you knew about the Hans Holzers, the Harry Prices, the Charles Dickens, you know, the Babbages, the Ghost Club, yeah, and then you eventually get to the point of Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren, and of course, for a long time, he spewed the title that he was the Catholic Church demonologist, and really kind of latching onto Carl's mind and picking it, kind of what led me to that pathway, because then I started realizing that being an investigator, especially starting to get into residential cases, because I had founded my own group before I met Carl, was called Ghost Hunters of Supernatural Truth. We started going from kind of like the ghost hunts and the legend tripping to actual doing residential cases. And we came across a few clients throughout that time that needed help. They weren't just like, oh, give me the data, give me the evidence that I am not crazy, but how do you get rid of this thing? And me, I don't know how to get rid of that thing. So, or how to help you and how to assert myself to an extra degree. So, in that time working with Carl, I was also a pastoral assistant with the Church of Christ. So it really kind of just melded together that I would do ministry work, and then I would also get involved with demonology, an applied sense of being kind of a mediator between the church and a client, or being the church himself as at one point a deliverance minister. So then I could assess and then deliver.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I'm as I'm listening to you,
Yes.
I can't help drawing the parallels between what we do and what you're talking about.
Of course.
And you know, a lot of it is very, very similar. In you know,
Yes.
when we do an investigation of a private client,
Yep.
you know, you look at all those things. Obviously, the psychology comes into play, the
course.
pharmacology comes into play,
Yep.
a lot of those things. And of course, the biggest difference is that whereas you have these people that you would reach out to for assistance, in our case, you're one of them.
Yeah.
And we've done that in the
Yeah,
past.
for
We've
sure.
reached out to you and had you come and help us with a client. Obviously, you know, one of the things is that in what we do, the D word is something that people throw around,
Of course.
you know, with impunity.
Yeah.
You know, we for at one time we thought we had something inhuman
Yeah.
on the ship, but we never, and you know us pretty well, you
course.
know, the overreaction and jumping to the demon thing
Conclusions,
was not
yeah.
something that we did.
Yeah, for sure.
But we do that. We do the things you're talking about, and you know, I also love the fact that, you know, one of the parallels between you and us in terms of client technique is that the message you send to a client when you
Yeah.
just bail on them
Yeah.
is the worst possible thing.
Of course.
So that, you know, in the case where we had you, Eva Nagy and I investigated a house in Billerica, and we didn't even investigate. We went and spoke to them. And we went and visited a couple of times, and based on some of the stuff that was happening to the kids and some of the stuff that just seemed a little bit heavier than what we would normally do, we called James. And James came to the house and I think solved their problem.
Yeah.
But again, we never left them. I'm still in touch with them,
Yeah.
with
Right.
that woman,
Right.
because it's important from a client.
Of course.
You know, as you know, a lot of the clients we deal with, a lot of the time, all they want is somebody to tell them that they're not
Verify
crazy,
'em, yeah, verify, yeah, that they're
Yeah.
or
not
to be
cuckoo.
on their side. That's
Of
really
course.
all they're looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
And in a case like that, where the phenomena went beyond something that we were comfortable with,
Yeah.
we certainly
Yeah.
didn't have any problem, Colin, we're fortunate because we know you. There are other groups who may not be as fortunate because they may not have a resource at hand and may have to kind of reach out into the dark for somebody. But we never left those people behind. We always stayed in contact with them and made sure that the people they reached out to initially were always going to be there for them.
Yeah, and the paranormal is like a dark age, in a dark age kind of sense, because there is no yellow books. Well, yellow books is kind of inundated now, but there's no yellow books of demonologists. There's a lot
You're
of
thinking Thomas Register.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that call themselves a demonologist, but in reality, like I said, even though it is fundamentally like a self-title or an appreciation towards a certain study, there are certain things that you can look at and credentials you can look at. Like, for one, like I said, I was ordained in 2 different denominations. I have associates in theology. I'm working on my bachelor's in psychology right now that I'll have in April. I have illustrious construction background, so I can understand houses and how infiltration works and boilers. And then, so I have a lot of these credentials that I apply to assessing clients. Sure. Because what the problem is with a lot of people in the paranormal field is, and one problem with humanity in general is that we're very gullible creatures. And, I'm not saying everybody's gullible, but I'm saying that I take less of a subjective approach, and it's something you guys do. You guys take a very objective oriented approach, but there's not a lot of people that do that, unfortunately. Right. And me, I don't always, so when I go to a client's house, I don't make it about, and especially like those clients in Billerica, I don't necessarily make it about the paranormal. I make it about their life. I make it about what kind of actions that they're doing to counteract this, how I can subtract their mind from the activity that's occurring. Because at the end of the day, if I permeate more of the paranormal in their life, it becomes more of an anchor towards them. And that's what I do a little bit different too with how I've approached my accolades, because I started to see that, for one, like the D word, as that sounds so suggestive and naughty, I don't ever drop that word. One of the things that I think I could be accredited to with my involvement in the paranormal and being demonology is I've, in this modern age, I have been one of the kind of people that have kind of, in a sense, laid out kind of guidelines of how you can look at it to be demonic or not, and kind of lectured on it and gave awareness to what people get misdiagnosed in a situation. If it could be a lost loved one, it could be psychological issues, or it could be psychic projection. And I think I've been one of the leading people, and some people don't like it because they don't like to get their subjective nature thrown away.
They know what they want to hear.
And I deal with clients like that all the time, unfortunately. They want to hear the D word, or they bring the D word to the forefront. But through statistical data, and I love statistical data, even though I hate doing the math to get towards it, is that, I've done, I would say, close to 500 cases based on my case files. And I would say that 1% of those cases I would ever qualify as demonic.
That's what
we were going to get there.
Yeah, because honestly, when people think of paranormal, first thing everybody says, "Oh, did you run into any demons?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly where everyone's mind goes.
Yeah.
And it's just not true.
Well, yeah, and that's human nature. There's a psychology study, and doing psychology and learning it and becoming very acquainted with it, and through university, I've started to learn a lot more of what the human mind is capable of and why we jump to certain conclusions. And one of the text or kind of ideas they give is if you're looking at a bush in front of you and it withers and moves, right? Most humans are going to jump to the conclusion that it's an animal ready to pounce at them. But in reality, in the fact, most likely it's actually just the wind that is moving the brush. And we always jump to the worst case scenarios, and we see that a lot in the paranormal investigations, scratching, 3 knocks, objects moving, automatically, because that unknown is there and we don't know how to process it naturally, so it must be something evil.
Right.
or something attacking me, that's why we jump to those conclusions. And they're so littered out there, but the great thing about demonology, even though it is in the sense of being applied, is starting to develop more, especially with behavioral health and all that stuff, and mental health and understanding or what the body's capable of and certain stressors. We're starting to see the data that has been, because for 4,000 years, modern civilization has had some form of religion, if not longer, to the branches of animism. But for those 4,000 plus years, let's say even longer, because Hinduism is 4,400 years old, and that's the oldest modern day religion. But even Hinduism has always had that kind of dichotomy of good versus evil. So it's always been a nature in the hominid life for a very long time. Even the troglodytes had some form of religious structure, more if it was to life. But if something bad happened, they probably thought, what was that? Is something from beyond coming down to create mayhem in our lives? So we always jump to those worst case scenarios. And it's unfortunate, because if, I had a case that I always talk about where it was this gentleman that took over the house that his grandma lived in, and she had just recently died, so he moved in because he really didn't have, he was living in an apartment, and now there's a house brought to him. Who would say no to that, right? And things started happening. And so, of course, some investigation groups come in, and then I get called in because, these situations that happened, that he was being scratched, objects were moving, psychokinetic force was happening, the tables moving, and he started calling what was there demonic. He started provocating it, saying F you, F this, blah, blah, blah. And I take like a Hans Holzer approach too. Like I test people before I use them. I do believe people have abilities, but then there are other people that, of course, are a bunch of nonsense and money hungry. But I tend to, when
In the paranormal field?
Yeah, but
No way.
I tend to when I'm observing a case, I tend to, like I said, check all the boxes off. And if I can't find a cause and effect or start leading towards a conclusion to what it is, I bring on the next person. So in this case scenario, I brought in like probably 8 different mediums, because one said one thing, the other one said very similar things, the other one said very similar, and none of these people knew each other. None of them knew about the history of this house, because when I work with mediums, I don't give them the address. I don't give them the information. I tell them, meet me here, I'll bring you there. And every single one of them said that it's his grandmother that died there. And for some reason, she's still tethered there, maybe because of emotions. It was her husband's in her house, and she was tethered there because this is her place that she's lived for 50, 60, 70 years. So there's something latching her on to this plane of existence. And everybody, even though a little bit minute, a little bit different details here or there, that was the same response every single medium really gave. So my conclusion to it was that, and really what stopped the activity was, I said to the gentleman, is that let's just fundamentally believe this is your grandmother. You're swearing at her. You're telling her to get the hell out of her house. And that's why
scratch you for that.
That's why she's being malicious towards
you.
you, because and I said this in a physical sense, if I went up to my grandmother right now and told her to, F off, I'm pretty sure she's going to smack me around the old Italian style with a broom or something. And I said, these are the reactions that she's having towards you. And I know you're scared because you can't see her, and she's not able to, through some maybe decibel range that you can't hear, because you're not clairaudient, you can't hear her trying to attempt to speak to you. So she's trying these other actions to get your attention, but you keep jumping this way instead of this way. And when he stopped provocating and he stopped being so engulfed in the demonic word, activity stopped.
Things are gonna calm down.
It calmed down.
Sure. And it's, I like to think the reason that in all the years we've been doing this, I've reached out to you a grand total of twice. And only once did it turn out that you actually had to get involved.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that's because we have a pretty good understanding of basically what you just outlined.
Yeah.
That you know, you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And no matter how you would like it to be otherwise, at some point you're going to be dealing with somebody who's angry.
Of course.
So differentiating between someone who's angry and only has a limited number of ways to manifest that anger,
Of course, yeah.
differentiating between that and something else
Yeah. isn't
isn't always easy.
It isn't.
But you know, if it was easy, what's the expression? If it was easy, everybody could do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's what you were just talking
And
about.
that's the yeah.
Exactly that.
And that's the problem, is that a lot of people think it's easy. You know, I think the weirdest thing that I hear is, and I get approached a lot, and I'm more than willing to mentor people, and I'm more than willing to give people information, because I feel like if you don't learn something every day, you're not living life accordingly. If you learn something new every day, life is being lived. And I feel like giving people information is key. Knowledge is power. And so I don't mind mentoring people, but it's when the people come to me thinking that it's a roller coaster ride, that this is such a joyful experience, that every time I get a call, oh, I think we have a demon, I'm jumping for joy, doing jumping jacks, I can't wait. But that's not the case, because actually I haven't dealt with one in quite a few years. And, you know, I wake up every day hoping that I don't get one. And it's not because I don't think I can't handle it, but it's such a psychic drama, in the sense that it's like you're watching Young and the Restless or Days of Our Lives, and that's how you're kind of living when you're dealing with these people, because all those emotions and all these kind of characters are at play, and you're trying to figure out who's the bad guy, the good guy, and it's really difficult to deal with. So not is it just because you're dealing with this celestial being that quite possibly exists, but you're dealing with the family drama, you're dealing with the emotions. There's so many layers to those kind of cases, and it's difficult to deal with, because, you know, for a long time, you know, it's another psychological term called transference. And it's when you're sitting somebody across and you're doing therapy with them, and then you take their emotions home with you. You know, for a while in my early life of doing this, that happened a lot.
I bet it does.
And it was difficult to swallow, because, you know, you got to remember, and you guys understand this as investigators, you can walk out the door at the end of the night. They sleep in their bed. And these things, you know, tended to kind of revel in my head. But also the other thing, too, is that, you know, in my circumstances, I've also have been affected at my house, or have had things happen. And maybe that's happened to investigators, too, because there are attachments, there are people.
You're talking about after when you come home.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, there's dangers to what I do. So when people think it's a roller coaster ride and want to have fun with it, it's sad to me, because there was a case in Florida where this person called themselves an exorcist, a demonologist, and their inkling of idea to get rid of the demon out of this young girl was to burn her alive.
Ah, there you go.
Just took care of that.
So
That's
she
terrible.
survived, thankfully, but
They actually really did it.
they really did it. Yeah, you can look this up. This happened in Florida. But there are circumstances like this where people that aren't not able to see objectively or take like the proper research. Like, you know, I know people don't have to go to college. I went to trade school, but I've been in college. But there are certain ways to handle people and certain ways to religiously consult people. And you know, at the end of the day is when you have so many people wanting to do this because I think it's one for fame, and two because it's cool. You put people's lives at risk because there are so many people that are easily able to jump to the conclusion that it's demonic, and that's just not clients. That's paranormal investigators too.
Oh, I bet you more so.
Yeah, and just think. If I was just say I'm an average person right now, and you say, James, we believe there's a demon in your house. What is that going to do to my psyche? I'm going to start analyzing.
Now you're going to start seeing things.
Everything's
going to be negative.
Yeah, and if I'm from a Judeo-Christian background, I'm going to start thinking, oh, what did I do wrong? Does God hate me? And then your faith structure starts to demoralize, which faith, regardless of what you believe in, is actually one of the key components of your brain function. So when you start losing that, you just start to wither away. And so it's just like when you're dealing with this kind of subject, it's kind of, you got to put the oven mitts on and handle it differently than coming and collecting data. And I'm not saying you guys don't deal with clients, because I know you guys are a prime example, but there are so many other people, let's say out of 9 out of 10 teams, you're 1 out of 10 that do it. There's so many people that are approaching it differently and very, very abrasively.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying.
Now, you said you're taking psychology, or you?
Yeah, I have my degree in April. So I
So-
have, 6 months left?
I'm curious because we talked with with another gal, spiritual lady from Salem,
Yeah.
and we were just talking about even in the Pope's Exorcist. The first thing that he does when he comes in is he
Which is
wants
a
to
great
see-
movie.
Yes, he wants to know questions about the boy. If he's got well, obviously in this day and age mental health issues.
Yeah.
And to me, do you think it correlates?
Yeah, for sure. Like Pope Exorcist, I had, I want to touch upon that a little bit because I thought Pope Exorcist, even though I love Russell Crowe and Gladiator is one of my favorite movies, and a lot of other movies he's in is phenomenal, but I thought, I should be like the Exorcist movie kind of like reviewer or critic, because I watch them because I'm interested to see what the pop culture narrative is going to be about. So when the masses see it, I know what to expect from people to claim what they're dealing with. So, I had my reservations about the Pope's Exorcist because Father Gabriel Amorth, who Russell Crowe played, is not my idol, but somebody that I would look at as the leading expert that ever existed on this topic, because he performed over 100,000 exorcisms. He was
100,000?
Yeah, minor rite and solemn rite. So minor rites is done on a house, and solemn rites is done on a person. So it was a mixture.
I just learned something today.
There you go.
But he did over 100,000 exorcisms. He was the chief exorcist for the Vatican. So he went straight to the Pope. No, and as you've seen in the movie, and he wrote 2 good books out of the 3.
I read one that was really good.
Yeah, I'm assuming it was Exorcist Tells the Story.
It was Exorcist Tells the
Great
Story,
book.
yeah.
I tell everybody to read that book when they first started getting involved in this.
It's really good.
Like anybody I mentor, that's their first book to read, because if you have kind of a biased opinion on faith, yes, especially if you're a Christian and Catholic, that might suit you well. But if you're somebody of a different faith or another denomination, it will totally blow your walls down, because one thing, Father Gabriel Amorth was very opinionated, but he was also very strong in his faith, because it can show you why he was able to do the things he does, because he was unwavering. He was like a Padre Pio as an exorcist, and he quoted Pio a lot. But so yeah, the Pope's Exorcist was very interesting in the sense that it showed you his approaches. And my approaches are very similar. I do a 3-stage interview process, 1 over email, 1 over phone, and 1 in person. I like to see if the stories change, if they're claiming the demonic word is or possession, mostly possession.
Red flags.
Red flags, yeah. I tell them automatically they have to go see a psychologist or psychiatrist, or if they are seeing a therapist at this moment, they need to speak to them, and they need to allow me to get in the confines of their HIPAA, the HIPAA laws, and let me speak to the therapist one-on-one as well, to say, hey, what have you diagnosed? We're in the DSM-5. Are they, do they have any disorders? So yeah, I take a lot of those same techniques that you've seen in that movie. Another good one for the viewers and you guys, if you've never seen it, is another legendary actor, Anthony Hopkins in The Rite.
Yeah.
A great book too, and based on a true story.
I think I read the book and didn't see the movie.
Oh, you should watch the movie because it's Sir Anthony Hopkins. But
I'm going to start writing these down, though, right?
But hopefully, I answered your question with
Yes.
the
I can't believe you don't have a pad of paper. She writes everything down.
No, I do.
But yeah, no. So Pope's Exorcist is a good foundation kind of structure of what I do. Like, I'm not an exorcist. I am kind of If you have an investigator, you have an exorcist, I'm right in the middle. So what I always tell people, especially when I was a deacon with the church, and then as an acting demonologist, I would say I'm the mediator between the client and the church.
Okay.
So basically how the Catholic Church works, and you can see a little bit of it in the movie, is when somebody claims something, there is a length of documentation required. They have to go see a doctor, they have to go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so that they pass their physicals. They might have to get MRIs or brain scans. So all that stuff has to be documented before an exorcist is ever deployed to somebody's house, and it's usually reviewed by the diocesan bishop. Mm-hmm. So the bishop, the local diocese and the bishop has to review it before an exorcist gets involved. There has to be paper trails, and you got to look at it like this. For one, it's not only because they want the documentation, so they're not doing like a placebo effect exorcism or doing something that's going to cause mayhem in somebody's life. Like, yeah, sometimes the placebo could affect.
Like
work.
burning someone?
Yeah, burning someone. So like, let's say you have schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder, and you believe there's a demon in your life, or when you're another personality is a demon, and you know that maybe that personality is somehow wavering through the line of that dissociative through that other identity. You know, yes, an exorcism on that person through placebo could work naturally. Hippocrates, the father of medicine in Greek times, employed exorcisms as a form of psychotherapy, and it could work. But then there's also the other spectrum where it could do more damage, and that person that has that disorder goes out and kills people, or kills themselves. So they want the paper trail because they have to do the right precautions, but it's also a liability reason too. The Vatican is one of the richest banks in the world, and such a deadly blow of somebody killing themselves or killing a bunch of people after an exorcism is bad publicity. Let's just be honest.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely, and I'm sure, you know, as you said, you know, I can see somebody, especially somebody who's deeply religious, having someone tell them that they have a demonic presence, whether they're possessed, or what's the step before? Oppressed.
Yeah.
I could see somebody very easily losing hope.
Yeah.
And feeling as though, well, that's the end of that.
Yeah.
And killing themselves, or doing things that they've always wanted to do but never did because
Blame
they
it
had
on
a
someone
future
else.
to consider.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, so I can certainly appreciate.
Yeah, it's a scary world, and you know, I think it's a word that should be hesitantly used, or if utilized by a specialist that has the accolades. And I rarely ever, maybe once in my life through my cases, that I ever said the D word to the client. But usually that is internal knowledge. I will never say, yes, you're dealing with a demon. I will kind of white lie to them and say, yeah, you're dealing with something, but we will handle it. These are and then I give them the steps, and I give them kind of the medicine that they need to overcome this affliction. But nearly do I ever drop that word in a real life situation, because I know the repercussions that could be coming from it.
Even in our scenarios, you know, where we're not dealing with the seriousness, you know what I mean? We're not really dealing with that. We see it all the time. We see it's mind-boggling, the number of people who are so quick to say it.
Yeah.
And the gang laughs at me because I never say it. I say the D word.
Yeah.
Because it's just, once you say it, it never leaves. Some people so desperately want to believe it because it's not them.
Of course, it's not.
You know what
them.
I mean? It's not them. So it's no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
And that's what they want to hear. And you talk about subjectivity. It's everywhere.
Of course. And you can see a population shift. I wasn't alive. You probably were. But in 1974, an iconic movie came out that changed horror movies for the landscape.
The
Exorcist. And before The Exorcist, it was, yes.
You say you probably weren't alive.
I said you probably were alive.
Yeah, you were.
You were
and
alive.
I were alive. He wasn't.
And you were, sorry to disclude you.
Oh, that's
But,
okay. You can. It's all
Yeah,
right.
she was
I
fine with
was
that.
not alive.
She was fine with that.
But, you know, the topic beforehand was it was taboo in the sense a lot of people didn't talk about it. But look at what that movie did for certain things like the Ouija board, or
scared the crap out of me.
or for demonic possession. And it really, you can see fundamental pop culture injections into the population to where things start to spurt and more people become attuned to those sort of evils, and then insert it into their lives of this is what they're dealing. And it's very interesting to see kind of the trend throughout time, and especially more.
It certainly changed everything.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of people's, I'm not going to say what people knew, but what people thought they knew.
Yeah.
You know, it certainly changed everything. I would just want to ask you, since The Exorcist is on the table,
Of course.
I want to kind of divert here for one quick second and ask you this: best horror movie ever, The Exorcist?
No. My best, I would say it's Insidious is my favorite horror movie.
You know, I just saw that the other day.
I love
Somebody
that
else
movie.
said that.
I like it.
It was the only.
I haven't seen it.
It was the
I
only
It's a
movie.
great movie.
Okay, wait, let me write that down.
It was the only movie to ever really kind of give me that jump scare, because James Wan did perfectly. That was his, you know, of course he's the director of The Conjurings as well, but that was his first kind of paranormal movie, and just the idea of astral projection, getting trapped in that state, was just so fascinating. But then it also did add the element of the demonic as well within the astral plane.
It did, yeah.
But I thought there were so many different pieces to that movie that just made it so fascinating, and it did have the jump scares. The Exorcist now, especially if you watch it nowadays,
There's a new one too.
the Exorcist Believer, which got panned. Yeah, unfortunately, they should have just left it as where it was. But if not, but if you now watch The Exorcist now in modern times, it's so cheesy. It does have it does have some of those elements, like of course Tubular Bells is always a fascinating tune to listen to. I love Tubular Bells. I listen to it oddly sometimes.
My motion sensor that I usually investigate plays Tubular Bells.
But I just think, you know, watch it now, it's just so archaic. But I can imagine being in '74.
74, yeah.
It was just so, nothing was like it. And I can understand that, but now I don't think it's the best horror movie.
See,
it could have been a trajectory too for, I mean, everybody thinking about demons. I mean, granted I was born in, I won't even say, but I've been around a little while. But nobody, I mean, it wasn't ever talked
no,
about.
that's what I mean when I say it changed everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, because I think the best horror movie ever made was the original Omen.
Oh, Omen's good
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
Admittedly,
Yeah.
I had a little
alive
Lee Remick thing too. So,
Omen's awesome.
but Lee Remick grew up right down the street.
Did you really?
Really?
Yeah. Remick's,
heard you
her
tell me
father,
that.
Remick's department store was in Quincy Square.
Oh, that's crazy.
But I think that was the best horror movie ever made.
Omen's
because
good.
my thinking
666,
is
yep.
it's not so much the movie and the jump scares and that kind of thing as it is the idea that it plants in your noggin.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's why,
Everybody
unlike
looks for
most
sixes
people,
on
I
my
think The
head.
Matrix is a horror movie. Because
Really?
if you really think about the underlying plot of The Matrix, that none of us are really here, that we're all in those little
They're not
cocoon
real.
things. Just the underlying thought process is kind of scary.
It is
when
scary.
you think about it.
And oddly enough, that's actually, besides Star Wars, that's actually my favorite science fiction movie ever.
That's a great.
It's great. It's great.
It is a great movie. Okay, so anyway, I'm sorry. I'm the king of digressions.
No, you're good. Tangents are good.
I don't even remember where we were.
We were just talking about the mental health and perhaps.
Well, that's The Exorcist was good for that though, because it
was.
certainly showed the hoops those people jumped through before they got to
Oh, the Pope's
to
Exorcist.
the
yeah.
No, The
And The
Exorcist.
Exorcist.
Oh,
Yeah, there was,
You know, all the medical stuff
Yeah.
that the
That's
little
right.
girl went through
Yeah.
before
That's right.
they actually got to that point, and the fact that the priest was a psychiatrist,
yes, for sure.
right?
Yeah, so a lot of exorcists are actually they do double dip. Like Father Gabriel Amorth was never a PhD in psychology, but like Father Chad Ripperger, who is kind of like the modern day Gabriel Amorth, he also has a PhD in psychology, and he's written many fantastic books. They're more academic than what Gabriel Amorth wrote, which is more kind of there is like fiction elements to it as well of nonfiction.
Right.
But Father Chad's the same way. But he wrote a book which is one of my favorite reads. It's the science of mental health, relating to like the demonic possessed and stuff like that, and how it can apply to the supernatural.
Okay.
It's a really good book. It's like this big. It's bigger than 2 Harry Potter books put together probably. But yeah, no, it's fantastic when you have those kind of people that deal with it, that are specialized in a duality, because they can look at it in a theologian sense, but they can also look at it in a scientific sense, because I think where the paranormal we hinder on sometimes is that, you know, it is looked at as a pseudoscience by the scientific field. They think it's a laughingstock, and that's why you start to see a lot of the universities that used to have like ESP studies, like University of Virginia and stuff like that. They're now closing. They're starting to shutter because they haven't been able to, as much as people want to lament this study, this theory, there hasn't been enough concrete scientific method evidence of that this actually exists. And any true lab study that's been done by the true scientific field has shuttered basically everything certain people have gathered, because, you know, for one thing, for the scientific method and for it to become empirical or somewhat of a leading scientific theory, is that it has to be observed by multiple people, and every time, which is interesting to say, because the paranormal is always different, where I could see why it hasn't been emulated, but no lab study has, even by the same people, have been able to emulate the same thing. But that makes sense, because not every single haunting we deal with is the same. And so how is the emulation there? Yes, we can take case A to case B to case C and see, okay, there's similarities in how we draw those lines in the sand and say, okay, these dots kind of connect to what this was happening there. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with a different person.
I was just going to say that.
Which everybody's different. And you're dealing with a different location, different homestead, different family, different psyche, different physical makeup. You know, epigenetics come into play of how the line of genetics is created by their family. So there's so much that goes into that than to, like, okay, primates came this. Like, there's a lot more of a linear fashion to that than where the paranormal is just like in every single direction. So it's hard to emulate that. You know, I've never seen one case that was very similar, and that's what makes it difficult to analyze them.
Well, when you think about it, what evidence, and think about the evidence that we gather, what of that evidence is not subjective, really? I mean, we have videos, we have photographs. We have photographs we have a photograph that you were there when we took it, that you look at, I look at, and I say, this is a once in a lifetime capture. This is something that we will never get anything like this again. But 5 out of 10 people that look at it are going to say, no, it's a shadow, it's this or that, it's the other thing. So you know, all the evidence, you're talking about video. And it's still subjective. You know what I mean?
And that's why I say, sorry to interrupt, but that's why I think a lot of people say the holy grail is, when you're in a circumstance, is if you can get video, audio, picture, and if you add it to, at the same time, a personal experience within those 4 things or those 3 things, then it isn't undisputable. But the problem is we either get one or the other, maybe 2 out of the 4. So it's hard to say, okay, we got these 4 things, here's this moment, but people then look at it, like you said, subjectively. Oh, you have this video, where's the photo of the before and after? Where's the audio of them saying something? Was there any personal experiences? No, we didn't see anything, we just caught it. So like it sucks, because then you have like a lot of skeptics, and I'm friends with a lot of people that write for the Skeptical Inquirer, and which was connected to James Randi, who is very famously known for crapping. Amazing Randy was for crapping on paranormal investigators and like the Warrens, but he would always like point out this, but that doesn't denote that we maybe experience something that he's not experiencing to actually truly judge it.
You know, here's another question. Okay, you have your closed-minded people and your open-minded people.
Yes.
Okay, so that definitely plays a role in this whole thing, and you're going to have people that are just not No matter what you show them,
Yeah.
they're going to say, nope, nope.
Of course.
And, you know, I know a few people like that.
Well, I mean, of course, and I've always been more of a fan of Joe Nickel than the amazing Randy, myself.
Nickel's awesome.
Because Nickel is a guy who seems to me that if something unmistakable happened in front of him, he would, as much as he would hate it, he would say, geez, I don't know.
Well, which brings me to a point where, if you're closed-minded, something does happen.
Well, I mean,
You're not going to acknowledge it whatsoever.
you know, we have people on the ship all the time
Yeah.
who will come to me before we start and say, I just want to let you know, I don't believe. And I always say, what I always tell them is, it's not my job to convince you of anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My job is to show you a good time. So it's not my job to convince you. All I will ask you is this. When we're done, before you leave, I want you to come and see me
Yeah.
and explain to me what you just saw.
Yeah.
That's all I'll ask. I'm not going to try to convince you of anything. I just want you to come to me and explain to me what it was you just witnessed.
Yeah. And they usually can't, right?
Most of them seem to forget to
Yeah.
come see me.
Yeah.
Or run, no. just kidding.
And fortunately, the ones that do generally say, yeah, I
Right,
don't
yeah.
know. You know what I mean?
Still hesitant. Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Of course.
Because like I say, it's not our job to, you know,
Yeah.
you're going to believe what you're going to believe. And There's
Yep.
nothing you can do about that. That's
No.
why, you know, when you talk about, and his name always escapes me, the Russell Crowe character in the Pope's Exorcist.
Gabriel North.
You talk about him and how, you know, you kind of followed his protocols and the way he,
Yeah.
you know, that's why I was a Harry Price guy. You know what I mean? I was a Harry Price and a Hans Holzer guy. Those are the guys, to me,
Yeah.
those are the guys that invented it.
Yeah. Well, Harry
mean,
Price has his
They all do.
bad rep now, but
They all
yeah.
do. You know, Holzer had the Bully Rectory
Yeah.
thing you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so they all
They
have,
all
they,
do,
They
yeah.
all do.
Yeah, of course.
You know, the Ghost Club was another thing that you know, they went a lot of different directions
Yeah.
as well. So but from a pure protocol standpoint,
Yeah.
Price and Holzer told us all how to do it.
Yeah. Of course.
You know what I mean? It's the
Yeah.
it's the same thing.
And then, yeah, they created a groundwork, a foundation. You know, there's been a lot of people that have inputted, added to it, or, you know, predate it, like the Ghost Club or, you know, psychical research in the UK. But, yeah, I agree. They brought it kind of into investigative qualities, like Harry Price using baby powder, bells on doors, like just their approaches were adding, you know, not just putting somebody in a lab chair and observing them. It was how you observe somebody in their own house, because, you know, even Charles Dickens, who was a member of the Ghost Club and was a frequent writer of many other different fictional stories, he was actually very involved in writing short stories on the paranormal. And one of his first entries actually was a beginning and end chapter of a pamphlet novel called Haunted House. And even back then in the late 1800s, 1890s something, I believe, when he wrote this, or when he was around, is that he actually said that the human is the element to the haunting. Like when you put a human in the house activates, becomes the haunting. And it was very fascinating here, because even at that hour, it's true. We're the battery. Because I always say, it's like the kind of like relation you always hear, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, would there be ghosts without humans? And if there weren't humans that kept that emotion for people that were lost, or that emotion wasn't tethered to this world, which connects to our consciousness, would ghosts tether? Would they linger? If there were no humans, would ghosts be existing at all? Because I always make the joke, I've never seen a dinosaur ghost, you know? And, you know, the animals that we do see that tend to be in manifestations usually are animals that are at people's loved houses that were tethered to them by love.
Right.
They feel that emotion towards them because that was like their baby or the kid. So that's why we see those kind of animals. I just don't go out in the woods and see a random horse ghost galloping, you know, like, so there was an important element to Charles Dickens' writing when he wrote that. And it was very fascinating to see how that kind of started making the realization that we are the key. We are the catalyst. We are that battery.
And I mean, it's one of those things that makes complete sense once you start talking about it.
Of course.
It makes complete sense. You may not have thought of it initially. But,
No. You think that, because people most famously think of residual hauntings, which is like stone tape theory. Somehow if it's limestone or something that, what people believe in with permeation crystals, like it tethers to the grounds. Like, to me, I think it's just an implant of emotions. We have a daily ritual, right? We do the same thing I at least do almost the same thing every single day. So if I die and my intelligent consciousness still does not linger here, is there an ability that my imprint still lingers because I constantly for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years woke up, made my coffee, grabbed my lunch, made my lunch, left the door, went out. Is that ability of that imprint staying there? And that is a fascinating thing. But where I've started to come more where my outlook of things is, even though I think parapsychology is somewhat a farce, I do love it. But a lot of the foundations of parapsychology was abruptly created by somebody that I didn't think that had no psychology background at all. J.P. Ryan had no psychology background. He was a botanist. He had a doctor in botany, which is study of plants, and he created an idea of parapsychology based off Arthur Conan Doyle's lectures, which if you look at the Ghost Club, Arthur Conan Doyle, yes, he wrote the most brilliant detective to ever exist in Sherlock Holmes, but Arthur Conan Doyle was one of the most subjective people that you could actually come to. He was duped by the fairies in Ireland. He was duped by the person that duped Mary Todd Lincoln. I forget his name, but he went to jail in Boston for the imprints on the photos where it showed a ghostly figure. So he was duped so many times. So parapsychology was founded by Arthur Conan Doyle's kind of feedback by a guy that was a doctor in botany. So I have my love-hate relationships with it, but a lot of what I see nowadays, I feel is a lot of psychic projection or thought forms or dulpas, egregores, however you want to coin them. And it's not really illogical to say because some of our oldest faiths, tribal systems, totemism, I can't even say it right, but a lot of those religions that are all tribal or chieftain kinships believed in thought forms in creating these beings to protect lands. It's one of the oldest thoughts. So I start to see that a lot of people now that really want or think they're dealing with something eventually create this sort of artificial intelligence, not in a technological sense, but in a supernatural sense. And I actually did a study on this that actually kind of proved this, to be honest with you. But I feel it's what a lot more people deal with because now it's less of a taboo. It's more out there. You can't watch Travel Channel without ghost shows in it. It used to be about traveling and food. Now it's all about the paranormal. Best-selling movies out there are horror movies like The Conjuring. So, people have these kind of lingering thoughts. And now they hear a bump in the wall, maybe it's a squirrel in the wall, infiltration of air, something moves in their house, it's haunted. And they start creating these conceived thoughts, where these thoughts then start becoming projections, where maybe psychokinetic forces are happening, maybe through Outlook, they see that book, they're so concentrated and it moves. And then eventually, which is a metaphysical term, artificial intelligence, this artificial nature of this being then starts gaining this intelligence and starts understanding its own being of what it is. And a good example of that is
that's a really great. That's a really great timeline, sort of the metamorphosis.
Yeah.
Because I never, all the things you just talked about. Obviously, we know about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The thought forms and the relationship between your daily routine and the residual hauntings and those kinds of things. But I never even considered that as a trail, so to speak.
Yeah.
No, never did.
Yeah, it's very interesting to look at. It's something I started looking at a lot more lately. I feel like if people want demons, they can create their demons, and these can become outward projections, and in the sense that a shared hallucination. You know, you can hallucinate, but if we're all in the same circle and we're all hallucinating, it actually could become a shared experience.
Sure.
And I feel like people then can come into that equation and have that shared experience as well with the people that are dealing with this activity. And it's just fascinating. You know, it's something I started leaning more towards, and I feel like I'm onto something with it because it's just an element that's very intriguing. When somebody wants something, they get what they want. And
Manifestation.
Manifestation.
Yeah.
And actually, a really good experiment that was done on it was the Philip experiment in 1960.
I know both of us are.
You're gonna have to
Google it, the Philip experiment.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
actually
He's
created.
not going to tell us.
No.
No, so
You're
all right, so I'll go to a little bit into it, and this is kind of what I did.
gonna have to make it quick though.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to summarize it, so this is kind of what I did. So basically, a bunch of researchers created this fictional character, where they created the idea of who this person was, where they came from, that they had this family, and they named him Philip. And eventually kept saying, oh, Philip this, Philip that. And eventually this force that they created called Philip actually started responding back and giving answers and kind of going with the story that was created. And it was actually audibly caught, actually video recordings of items being moved. And this was actually a research topic, a research study that was done called the Philip experiment. Very fascinating experiment, and very something similar to what I did to somebody else in their own, in their deceased loved one's home. That was just built by them. Nobody died on the land. I did my history, and I did the same thing with him. Kind of played on his emotions, terribly unethical, unfortunately. But sometimes you have to do unethical things to actually get proper data, and you see this in psychology with the Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah, the Stanford experiment. I was thinking the same thing.
But so, you know, I did the same thing, and eventually I knew nothing was there because quintessentially, like, you know, of course we did some pre-recon, nothing happened. But then we started implanting into this person's mind, did you hear that? Or do you hear those footsteps? Even though nothing was really happening. And
It
then
was an interactive thought form.
yeah, and then eventually we actually started catching people talking on the recorder. Doors actually closing by themselves.
Crazy. Yeah.
So it actually created something. It was very fascinating. It really kind of gave me a lot of insight to my perspective of the paranormal now. I do believe ghosts and demons exist, but I believe a lot more people tend to deal with a
You just
thought
answered my
form,
question, yeah.
thought form nature. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Well,
I hate to do this
I
because this has
know.
been great.
I know, it's been
Uh,
amazing.
but
I didn't even
we're-
get to the Romania trip.
Oh,
We
jeez.
could go a little longer.
We really can't.
We'll have to have you
We really
come back.
can't. We
We'll
could
have-
have you
yeah,
back
yeah,
because
we'll
this
have
was
you
this was great, and
Yeah.
there was a lot of stuff I wanted to talk to you about that we never got to.
Sorry, go on tangents.
No, that was
No, very
absolutely
good.
that was absolutely
I
cool.
learned a couple things today, so I'm living.
Hey?
So thank you very much,
Thank
James,
you.
for
Yeah,
coming.
thank
Always
you.
a pleasure,
Thank
my
you.
friend.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
We have some things coming up. I'd like to pump up some events on the ship. Unfortunately, there's no way for you to get tickets anymore because they're all sold out. But we'll be starting to publicize our events for next spring aboard USS Salem. We've got some other stuff coming up here in the near future. And we'll have some new episodes here coming. Just as we're sitting here talking to James, I have some new episodes banging around in my head. There's a lot of room up there, so I have quite a few ideas, and maybe we'll get some stuff done here shortly. But thanks again. Visit us at www.thegbpa.com. Visit us on Facebook, Greater Boston Paranormal Experience, Greater Boston Paranormal Associates, or the USS Salem Paranormal Experience. I'm sorry. And we're around. We're on YouTube at Greater Boston Paranormal Associates or Greater Boston Paranormal TV, or your local cable system.
That's it, right here.
So please join us next time, and thank you very much for watching.
Thanks for joining us. Take care.